There were small clashes today between the army and protesters still camped out in Tahrir Square. They're refusing to leave until all of their demands are implemented.
These next few days and weeks are going to be crucial to the success of democracy in Egypt. And this very delicate situation has enormous implications for America, affecting everything from the war on terror to the price of gas.
We're going to focus on this morning on a set of key questions of pressing importance to Egypt, America, and the world. We have our team of reporters across the region, and we start with Terry Moran. And Terry, the question for you is, who will lead Egypt?
Well, Bianna, the short answer is nobody knows right now. The military is in control. There is a civilian government to carry out day-to-day functions, begin constitutional reform. And then there's people power out in the streets and in the square. But we've been out in the streets, out in the square. It's a very different atmosphere. There are people who don't want to leave. But I'd say most of Egypt right now wants to get to a post-Tahrir Egypt. And that is a journey, the journey of democratic self-government. You've got constitutional discussion groups sprouting up on Facebook. You've got committees. You've got the Muslim Brotherhood. You've got mosques. Everybody discussing what comes next. They want to see a clear timetable for elections. They want to see the lifting of this 30-year state of emergency. It is a time of peril, but a time of promise as well. And that is really where they're headed.
So fascinating, this national discussion. Terry Moran, thank you once again for your reporting. Jim Sciutto is also in Cairo, as you know, with the protesters who are refusing to leave this morning. Jim, good morning to you.
Dan and Bianna, there's a real division in the square this morning between those who are ready to go to end these protests in the square and those who want to stay. Some opposition leaders say they trust the military to manage the transition to a democratic state. Others here say, no, we must hold this ground until all of our demands are met. Many of the people streaming into the square today are focused on bread and butter issues, jobs, pensions, etc., that in many ways are some of the most difficult to answer immediately. But very clear this morning, Dan and Bianna, that these protests will not end right away.
Our thanks to Jim Sciutto. And moving now from Cairo to the resort town of Sharm el-Sheikh on the Sinai Peninsula, where ousted Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak has taken refuge.
Mubarak made a fortune, maybe billions of dollars while in office, and now investigators are looking into how he got so rich. So our question for Alex Marquardt this morning is, what happens next to Hosni Mubarak? Alex.
Good morning, Dan. Former President Mubarak is believed to be holed up at his seaside villa in this legendary Red Sea resort. He hasn't been seen or heard from since Thursday when he told the Egyptian people he would not be stepping down. He has said he wants to die on Egyptian soil, and so far he's been allowed to stay. And though the Swiss have frozen his bank accounts, U.S. officials believe he still has between $1 and $5 billion stashed in banks around the world. There are rumors that he's already in or on his way to the United Arab Emirates to avoid prosecution. Meanwhile, several top Egyptian officials have been barred from leaving the country. Dan, Bianna.
The revolution in Egypt was sparked by an uprising in Tunisia. And so another big question this morning, are there more dominoes in the region to fall?
That's right. Protests are erupting in Algeria's capital, where demonstrators violently clashed with riot police. There are also some protests in Iraq, and now there are calls for protests in Iran and Libya. And Palestinian leaders are suddenly calling for elections to get ahead of it there. Our Martha Raddatz is in Yemen this morning, where the government is working closely with the U.S. to battle al-Qaeda.
That's right. There were huge protests in Algeria's capital today. Tens of thousands of protesters hitting the streets, and also political upheaval in the Palestinian Authority. And nearly 1,000 protesters here on the streets of Yemen. There were a few violent confrontations between pro-government forces and opposition groups, but the opposition here has already forced a change. The president has said he will not run for re-election, and that seems to have satisfied the protesters for now, although officials are not ruling out larger demonstrations in the future.